You don't wake up one morning and suddenly fear abandonment. It happens slowly, quietly, over years. It builds itself in you like mold in an old house, unseen until it's already in the walls. It begins in childhood, sometimes in moments you can't even remember. A mother who was emotionally absent, a father who left and didn't explain why, a caregiver who was physically there but never emotionally reachable. You don't need to be hit or shouted at to feel abandoned. Sometimes it's the silence, the cold indifference, the absence of warmth that hurts more. And because you're so young, you don't have words for what you're feeling. You just know something isn't right. You cry and no one comes. You smile and no one notices. You try to be good, try to be helpful, try to be perfect, just to earn the connection that should have been unconditional. You learn early that love has a price, and the currency is your authenticity. So you start bargaining with the world. You hide your needs to avoid being a burden. You shrink your emotions to avoid pushing people away. You learn to adapt, to become who you're supposed to be, quiet, easy, self-sufficient. And that's the origin of the fear, not in a dramatic breakup or a betrayal later in life, but in the quiet, unspoken training of your nervous system. You were taught that to survive, you must not be too loud, too needy, too emotional, too much. Because if you are, someone will leave, and their absence will feel like dying. This fear isn't irrational, it's logical, it makes sense based on your early experience, and yet it poisons everything. As you grow older, you carry this blueprint into every relationship. You think you're just being careful, but what you're really doing is surviving a war that ended years ago. You enter relationships already bracing for the exit. You don't get attached easily, not because you're strong, but because you're scared. And when you do finally attach, the fear only grows stronger. You try to control the connection. You try to predict every shift in tone, every delayed reply, every unread message. Your brain fills in the blanks with worst-case scenarios. You interpret distance as rejection. You read silence as punishment. You imagine someone leaving, not because they said they would, but because everyone has eventually. And so you begin to preemptively abandon yourself. You don't tell the truth about what you want. You don't express your anger, your sadness, your disappointment. You don't ask for reassurance, even though your insides are screaming for it. Instead, you make yourself easy to love, or what you think is easy to love, and yet you never feel loved. Because how can someone love you if you never let them see who you really are? This is what Kierkegaard meant when he spoke about despair as not being oneself. It's a spiritual sickness, a disconnection from your own essence. You become an actor on the stage of your life, wearing the mask that gets applause, afraid to take it off, terrified that if someone sees your face, they'll walk out of the theater altogether. You think you're protecting yourself by being careful, but what you're doing is bleeding out slowly in the name of connection. And the irony is brutal. The very things you do to prevent abandonment, people-pleasing, silence, self-sacrifice, are the things that make relationships fragile. You build relationships on your performance, not your truth. And eventually, the weight of that performance collapses the entire structure. But how could it be otherwise when your entire nervous system is screaming that love equals danger? Your heart wants intimacy, your trauma wants distance, and you're stuck in the middle, craving touch, flinching from it, wanting to be seen, terrified of being exposed. It's not just romantic relationships either. This fear infiltrates everything. At work, you don't speak up when something's wrong. You take on more than you can handle. You smile through exhaustion, hoping to be liked. You stay late, you say yes, you don't complain. Because somewhere deep down you believe your worth is conditional, that you must earn your place every single day. With friends, you rarely ask for support. You're the one who listens, the helper, the one who always shows up, even when you're falling apart. And when no one checks in on you, you don't get angry, you just feel confirmation that maybe you were always meant to be invisible. even in your passions, your creativity, your dreams. This fear is present. You self-sabotage not because you don't care, but because you care so deeply that failure would feel like abandonment by the universe itself. So instead of trying, you procrastinate. Instead of risking vulnerability, you hide in comfort. You build a life where you are constantly performing emotional CPR on yourself, on others, on relationships that feel like they're dying the moment they begin. And the cost? It's unbearable. Because when you fear abandonment this much, every moment of closeness is painful. When someone texts back, you exhale. When they don't, your heart drops. When they love you, you can't relax. When they leave, you feel destroyed, but weirdly relieved. At least now, you know the end. At least now, the waiting is over. You get addicted to the cycle. You chase validation, receive it, then immediately question it. You pull people close, then push them away. You want intimacy, but you don't trust it. You crave certainty, but run from it. Because deep down, certainty is unfamiliar. Chaos feels like home. Anxiety feels like love. And silence feels like punishment, even when it's not. This fear doesn't just affect how you relate to others, it changes how you relate to time. You live in the future, always anticipating the end. You're rarely present, rarely grounded. You're busy managing potential disasters that haven't happened yet. You're emotionally forecasting doom every time you feel happy, because joy, to you, feels like the calm before the storm. You've learned that hope is dangerous, so you settle for anxiety instead. At least anxiety prepares you. But what if I told you that this fear is not yours? That it was implanted? That the child version of you had no other choice but to believe that love is fragile, that connection is earned, that abandonment is inevitable? Because when you're little, you don't think, my parents are emotionally unavailable. You think, I must not be worth staying for. That conclusion becomes the foundation for everything else. And it's false. It was always false. But it felt true. And what feels true becomes the compass for your adult life. But you're not that child anymore. And you're not helpless now. You can pause the performance. You can sit with the discomfort. You can challenge the reflex to disappear every time someone looks like they might not choose you. The fear doesn't go away by fighting it. It softens when you name it. When you say, this feeling isn't the truth, it's just a trigger. When you recognize the difference between a real threat and an old wound being poked. Kierkegaard wrote about the dizziness of freedom, that terrifying feeling when we realize we are not just victims of circumstance, but active participants in our own lives. That freedom is terrifying because it means we can no longer blame our pain on fate. We must choose, consciously, who we are and what we do. We must own our patterns, not just endure them. And choosing to heal this fear of abandonment means daring to believe that some people will stay, not because you've twisted yourself into someone lovable, but because you were already lovable, even in your rawness, your grief, your need. Healing means allowing the real you to be seen by others, and more importantly, by yourself. It means telling the truth even when your voice shakes. It means risking rejection, not to chase chaos, but to discover peace. You don't get there overnight. The first time you speak up, it'll feel like you're suffocating. The first time you let someone in, you'll want to run. The first time you receive love without performing, it'll feel alien, maybe even wrong. But that's not your intuition warning you. That's your trauma protesting. It's the ghost of your past telling you this can't be real, this isn't safe. And you have to respond not by pushing the ghost away, but by sitting with it, by saying, I hear you, but we're not in danger anymore. That's what reparenting really is. Not affirmations or aesthetics, but moment after moment of choosing not to abandon yourself, even when it feels unbearable. It's holding your inner child with both hands and whispering, I won't leave you again. not for anyone, not even for love. And eventually, that inner child begins to trust you. You stop needing everyone else to stay, because you've started staying for yourself. You stop bending for scraps of affection, because you've started nourishing yourself with something deeper than approval. You stop panicking when someone doesn't reply right away, because your nervous system isn't screaming for rescue anymore. You stop chasing people who won't commit, because you know what it feels like to be loyal to yourself, and the people around you shift. Some drift away, because they were only there for the performance. Others come closer because your truth gave them permission to show their own. And a rare few, will sit beside you on your darkest nights, not because you're easy to love, but because you're real. And real always finds real. But none of that can happen if you keep living in fear. None of that can happen if you keep abandoning yourself to keep others close. You have to risk something. You have to risk being misunderstood, disappointing people, standing alone for a while. And yes, it will feel like abandonment all over again. But this time, it's not. It's liberation. It's the shedding of a lifetime of masks. It's the quiet reclaiming of your life. It's the slow, steady remembering of who you were before. The fear taught you to forget. You're not here to earn love. You're not here to prove anything. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be whole. And that means feeling the fear of abandonment and choosing to love anyway. Choosing to trust anyway. Choosing to stay open, not because you're sure, but because you're brave. That's how you take back your life from fear. You sit in the silence and resist the urge to fix it. You let the message go unread. You stop rereading the texts, replaying the tone, overanalyzing the breath between sentences. You stop rehearsing what you'll say if they leave, and instead you look in the mirror and say, if they go, I'll grieve, but I won't disappear, because this time you're not going with them. This time you're staying, with yourself, and that choice, that sacred, quiet, terrifying choice to stay with yourself, that's how the fear begins to lose its power. Not all at once, not forever, but for today, and that's enough.